excited to be here today, and I see so many students and so many workers. I see some politicians, I see some colleagues, friends, comrades, and people in solidarity. Thank you so much for coming.
So I just want to say before we start the rally that we are a live streaming event as well, so I'm sure we'll be joined by some wonderful student staff, comrades, supporters on the digital space as well. My name is Matt Quilly. I am the President of the National Union of Students Scotland. And I really do want to say a big thank you to all for coming along today. Now, why are we here? We're here because students and staff in Scotland are being let down by the same failing education system. That's why we're here. Just yesterday, the National Union of Students published new research, and the picture that it plays was stark. It showed that 12% of students in Scotland have been homeless since the start of their studies. It showed that 1 in 3 students had considered dropping out of college or university because they didn't have enough money to survive. It showed that 31% of students are relying on commercial debt, things like Klarna, to get to the end of the month. And that's why we're out here today, to say enough's enough on student poverty. We need real action to address student poverty. And I want to say a big thank you as well to all the students out here. The further education students were among the hardest hit of students in Scotland. That students in further education were more likely to have to rely on commercial debt, were more likely to have not been able to pay their rent. And this is the situation that students are facing. We are here today because we know that staff's working conditions are students' learning conditions. But to put a spin on it as well, students' learning conditions are staff's working conditions. So we know when students are forced to work excessive hours alongside their studies, we know that when they're driven into poverty and they're dealing with really challenging personal circumstances, we know that it's the staff at the other end of the email or the call for help that students put in. And for that, I do want to say thank you to the staff that are here today as well. We are here today because the government is letting us down. They've promised student action. They've promised students action on summer support. But where is it? We've been promised rent controls. But how long can we afford to wait? We've been promised an Erasmus replacement. But where is it? And while these promises were made, behind the scenes, they were delivering real terms cuts to their education, hitting colleges particularly hard. But we're also here today because the same education system that's letting students down is an education system that's letting staff down. As a student, I've seen my classes get bigger and bigger, the class sizes, while the same number of staff get more and more stressed. As a student, I'm here because PhD students and researchers are on strike and are among the most precarious of workers in universities that the UCU represent today. I'm here because I know as a student that the same bosses that raise tuition fees and fail to invest in student services are the same bosses threatening your pensions and conditions. And finally, as a student, I am the lecturer, the librarian, the university and college worker of the future. So your working conditions now are my working conditions in the future. And with that, I'm going to pass on to Lena, UCU Scotland President.
Thank you. I'm so glad and proud to stand here as President of UCU Scotland. We also have the UCU UK President here to speak later on. First of all, I want to say I am exhausted. I am absolutely exhausted. And I can tell you that in my plus 10 years of working in Scottish higher education at 5 different universities on about 20 different contracts, never have I met a colleague who is not absolutely exhausted. Not tired, exhausted. This is not normal. This is not sustainable. We have people leaving the sector because we are falling ill, because we can't afford to keep being on these horrible, precarious contracts. The people who are leaving, because they are facing the brunt of precarity more than others, are people of color, women, and disabled people. So we are on strike, and we are on strike over our pensions against a huge pension cut that is not necessary or needed. But we are also on strike, as you know, over pay inequality. So against pay discrimination, which my brother-in-law asked me, isn't that illegal? I said, yes. And we are also on strike against the precarious conditions that, again, hit certain people more. Black people are twice as likely as white people to be on precarious contracts in the UK. So, we are also standing here, of course, in solidarity with our students. Matt pointed out that students' learning conditions are staff working conditions. And even though we try our absolute best, we try to shield our students, we try to do our absolute best, if I have to teach a course in Glasgow in the morning and have a meeting with Liverpool over lunchtime, and in the afternoon meet a student to supervise the dissertation at Heriot-Watt University, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky. Precarity is the worst. Precarity is the worst, and it specifically affects people who are already discriminated against in society. It also affects students, as I mentioned. So, we are here to rally for valuing staff, but also we are here to rally to end student poverty, and as Matt pointed out, to end exorbitant tuition fees and landlords exploiting you. And I can tell you, a lot of the problems that students face are also faced by precarious workers. Landlords taking all of your money, this affects precarious staff as well. So, I'm very glad to be here, and we will move on now to other speakers. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Elena. And was we knowing that you brought solidarity from the sky as the rain stopped as you were speaking. Next up, I'd like to invite Michael Mara, MSP, to give us a speech. And Michael Mara represents Scottish Labour on education matters. Michael.
Thanks, Matt. And thanks to every single one of you who's come here to the Parliament today to make your voices heard. What a turnout, really. For those who are watching online, this is the biggest rally we've had outside this Parliament since the election last May, without a doubt. It's the loudest, it's the proudest, and people are speaking up for the thing I think that matters most in our country, which is education. Rally for education here today. Thank God. We need more of it in this country. We need more voices speaking for education, calling out the policies that you're seeing the sharp end of in our universities, our colleges and our schools across Scotland. So you've been out, I know, on picket lines these last few weeks in the cold and the rain. So thank you to all of you who are doing that. You have the full solidarity and support of the Scottish Labour Party, the Scottish Labour movement. We stand with you and we support you. We're making the arguments for your pay in terms and conditions inside the Parliament, and we'll continue to do so. Thanks for inviting us here today. It's absolutely clear that over the last decade, so the unit of resource, as it's called, the amount of money the Scottish Government pays per student, has not gone up since 2009. 13 years. 13 years, we've said, and we know the cost of living is rising across Scotland dramatically for everyone, for every single one of you, and that comes out of the pay packets. If you don't put more money in, no wonder your conditions are being squeezed day by day by day. The budget that was passed here a couple of weeks ago just continues that trend. We know how hard colleges have been hit. It's already been mentioned by colleagues. A £51 million real-term cut. We know there's a mental health crisis amongst our students right across Scotland, and the money to pay for that has been removed. We know that we've got the situation with pensions across the whole of the UK, which has gone on for years and years and years. You're fighting for my pension. I worked the last 10 years in the University of Dundee, and so thank you for rallying for that as well, for my pension too. There's so many people who can't be here today, and I know that you're standing with them as well. We often hear that our education, our universities are the most important resource that this country has. Well, this government needs to start acting like it. It needs to start acting like it, it needs to start paying the bills, it needs to make sure that we can have the universities to be proud of, because I know over the pandemic how hard university lecturers and staff have worked in incredibly challenging conditions, online working, which for so many people has been incredibly difficult, and the students who have suffered as a result as well. And I know what's the most powerful thing today is that we have university staff, lecturers, standing with students together, because only together can you win this argument. So well done to the NUS, well done to UCU, you have our solidarity, let's keep rallying for education.
And next up, I am glad to say we have Willie Rennie from the Liberal Democrats.
You're looking wonderful this afternoon. You're looking colourful. I love the hats. You're looking noisy. But I am really sad. I am really sad that you're here having to make this argument once again. How many times over recent years have you had to chant no education cuts? How many years have you had to protest outside universities? How many times have you had to stand up against cuts to education? Well, it should come to an end, and the Liberal Democrats are standing with you against the cuts. What is important is that we stand up against poor pay. The university sector is not getting funded sufficiently. We need to stand for decent pensions. Decent pensions is what is essential for our future. But we also need to stand against short-term contracts. Too many people stand for too many years working in our university sector on short-term contracts. That needs to come to an end. You are educating our future. You are educating the next generation. You are discovering the new cures, the new opportunities, the new advances. You have got one of the best sectors in the whole world. It's about time this government and university bosses respected that and funded that to make the difference. So the message is clear from this event today, and Michael is right. This is probably one of the most colourful and biggest protests since the election last year, probably well before that too. And that is the right thing to do. But let's make sure this is one of the last protests, so we can get the government and the university bosses to listen on pensions, on pay and on short-term contracts. Thank you for coming today. Keep up the fight.
Thank you, Willie. Actually, see on the precarious contract chart, I just want to say our research also found that more than 4 in 10 students that are employed as workers are on precarious contracts or work in the gig economy. So there's convolutions of the issues. But next up, I'd like to invite Cockab Stewart, MSP from the SNP, and who's also Vice Convener of the Education Committee. So please welcome Cockab.
Thank you to Lena and Matt for the invite to join the rally today. There might be many people here who know that I was actually a teacher for 30 years and taught right up to the moment that I was elected, and I'm still a member of the PTC, and I'm still a proud associate member of the NASUWT, so a shout out to them as well. I also represent a constituency of Glasgow Kelvin, which has 8 institutes of further and higher education, and 9 including the Open University, who also deserves to have a wee shout out on that level as well. As a previous educationalist coming to terms with my new role as a parliamentarian, I've long held and continue to hold the view that learning is the most productive when the learner and the teacher are well supported, free from the barriers to learn, such as student tuition fees, and those most at disadvantage of being provided with additional support, which for what the Tories like to trumpet, levelling up the playing field. Although it's clear that when the Conservatives talk about levelling up, it's really a code for us to pay through national insurance increases. And their tax-avoiding friends like to settle down with dodgy dealings and all the rest of it. That's the Westminster way. I do know that my colleague Jamie Hepburn has met with the University of Scotland and the UCU to encourage everyone. I'll speak to him, don't you worry. Encourage everyone to continue with the current negotiations in an attempt to resolve this situation. And that's the Scottish way, is to try and resolve this situation. Fair work has to be a fair deal for all. When trust breaks down, no one wins, least of all the students. Over this parliamentary session, I will be supporting the SNP Green government to bring the total student support package to the equivalent of the living wage over the next 3 years, including for estranged students. Introduce a special support payment so that students on benefits don't lose out because they're in receipt of or entitled to student support, and to undertake a review of postgraduate funding that takes measures to halt student loans and interest during maternity leave. So my final words today for you are to keep fighting, keep arguing for your right to learn, for your right to be rewarded for a fair day's work. Scotland's reputation for excellence in education, in higher education, demands it, and even though this remains a reserved issue, the SNP will campaign with you to achieve that deal, and I stand in solidarity with you both as an SNP member and as a teacher. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaukas. And next up, I am delighted to say we have Maggie Chapman from the Scottish Greens. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. It's great to see so many of you here. It's great to be amongst you all and to see so many familiar faces. On behalf of the Scottish Greens, I bring you solidarity, I bring you strength, and I bring you power, because what you're doing here today is vitally important for your education, for your jobs, and for our future. So all of you gathered here today, whether you are workers out on strike or students standing in solidarity, we are fighting for something better. We are fighting for better pay and conditions. We are fighting for better pensions. We are fighting for better learning environments. We are fighting for better research environments too. And we know that the working conditions of our staff are the learning conditions of our students, as Matt said earlier. So it's really, really important to see this as a united fight, staff and students standing together. But we should not have to be here. Like many of you, I have been part of the fight for education justice for decades. I have stood on picket lines alongside you, first as an AUT member, then as a UCU member, and then as an EIS member, and continued standing in solidarity with you as Rector of Aberdeen University. We have been fighting this fight for far too long. We may have won some battles over the years, but we should not still have to be here fighting the same fight. Education has the power to change the world. It has the power to empower all of those who don't feel they should or could have a voice. It allows us to expand our minds and our horizons. It allows us to be creative. It allows us to make the world a better place. That is why I believe that education is a universal good and should always be free. Education should never, ever be run for profit. Centres of learning and training should not be the cash cows of university management and pension schemes. We've already seen cases of universities threatening and criticising their workers for taking action, but they forget, in reality, who really has the power. You the workers, you the students. Universities and colleges rely on you being quiet, you being pliant, you doing as you're told, you doing what you think is in the best interests of the people you care about, your students. Not senior management, not those with massive paychecks, not those that will benefit from the changes to the pension schemes. So huge solidarity from the Scottish Greens with all of you out on strike. All of you out on strike, all of you here in solidarity, trying to get just what you deserve from Universities UK. You deserve this. It is your right. And it is so important that students are part of this fight, are part of this struggle. Thank you to UCU Scotland and all those adding your voices to this fight on issues of student poverty, on student precarity, on issues like tenant injustice. All of these things, student support, these are all part of our education system and they need to be better. Additional funding, the discretionary funding that was announced yesterday and the changes to the student loan are to be welcomed, but they don't go far enough. They are only part of what we need to see. We need to be tackling the systemic, structural issues that mean that we are still here outside campaigning and struggling and fighting today. So, just to wind up, thank you again for being here. I hope that we don't need to be here in 2 decades' time saying the same things, arguing the same things. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep up the good fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. And next up, I'm really excited to invite up Ros Foyer, who is General Secretary of the Scottish Trade Union Congress. Ros.
Thank you, Matt. I'm really excited to be here. In fact, I'm absolutely proud to be here. This is what democracy looks like. The people power that people standing here today have shown. And we've got to get bigger, we've got to get angrier, and we've got to get louder. Because we've heard a lot of warm words from the politicians today. And I have to say, I'm sick of hearing the Scottish Government talking about fair work. I'm sick of hearing how important education is. I'm sick of hearing about how we're building a more inclusive economy, because that isn't the truth. The truth is we're going backwards. Living standards for working people are falling in Scotland while the rich continue to get richer. And the only way we're going to make them do something about it is through fighting back in our workplaces and fighting back in our communities. So well done. Well done to all of you. The people that are taking strike action in UCU are fighting for equality in their sector, they're fighting for decent fair pay, they're fighting for a decent pension, and they're fighting for job security. Who doesn't deserve that among our workforce? And students deserve to undertake education without putting themselves in precarity and poverty. That is what we're fighting for, and I'm so pleased to see us uniting in that fight together. bosses in education, just like the bosses across our country, have tried to reduce what is a human right and an essential public service to nothing more than a profit-making commodity. And we need to stop that. Maggie's right, education should be free, and it is a public service, and it is an essential public service, and that's what we need to demand. Nothing more, nothing less. So let's join up our fights. This is part of a bigger fight. This is why we're facing a cost of living crisis in this country. We need to stop the bosses from sucking the profits out of our essential services in education, in care, in transport, in energy, and we need to start fighting back. So I want to join with all of you in that fight. We need to take to the streets and not let the politicians off with it any longer. Thank you very much.
Speaking of bosses, where are the bosses? Are you here today? Bosses, principals, senior management? Because I think a good boss should probably be there. Okay, next up we have my dear colleague from University of Edinburgh, Erin Laing, who is an anti-categorisation officer for UCU and a fellow tutor there. Erin.
Hi. Okay. Oh, people can hear me. Okay. There is a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part, and you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. Mario Savio, one of the Berkeley free speech movement activists, made this speech in 1964 at the University of California. The academic industrial machine that marketizes education and charges international postgraduate students £20,000 a year has been expanding at the expense of us. The people who make up that machine, the PhD student staff, the early career researchers, the professional services staff that keep the university going, often behind the scenes and having their work unacknowledged. In 2021, the University of Edinburgh, a registered charity, made a £113 million surplus. When I applied for a scholarship in 2020 as a first-year PhD student, I was rejected. Later told that there were only 2 scholarships available that year at the School of Social and Political Science. There were more than 100 applicants. The reason for this, the university doesn't have enough money to fund their own PhD students. In 2020, with the first wave of COVID-19 infections, in the middle of a nationwide lockdown, I received an invoice from the university to pay my tuition fees of £20,100, sorry. An increase of £1,100 justified by inflation. Of course, as a tutor, my pay has not been raised. As a tutor, I am told that I am given 2.5 hours to prepare for 3 groups of tutorials. This includes reading the readings and coming up with lesson plans. I am told that I have to read and feedback 1,500-word essays in 20 minutes. Yet what kind of substantive feedback can I give to students in that time? I refuse this. I refuse this university that asks us to work more efficiently, to teach more, to teach better for less money and less time. I refuse this university where being a better tutor means doing unpaid work and taking time out of my PhD, the very reason that I am here. My name is Erin, PhD student staff at the School of Social and Political Science, University of Edinburgh, and I believe, when and only when we are free from the machine will another university be possible. Thank you.
So much, I'd now like to invite up Allison Mackay, who is Vice President of Stirling Students' Union. Allison.
Hello everyone, it is so wonderful to see this many people here today. I'm from a small town in the northeast. I grew up in an incredibly impoverished family. I'm a first-generation university student. I have learning difficulties. I didn't think I would make it to university, but I foolishly thought that by the time I did, after working so hard in school for 6 years, putting everything I could into getting into a university, I really did think maybe, just maybe, having a degree would be able to change my future, my family's future, so that the circle of poverty does not have to continue. But I finished my degree now. I'm a sabbatical officer. I'm severely underpaid for the amount of work we do. And I don't see this cycle changing anytime soon. This is not a situation that just happened to appear out of nowhere. Poverty is a system that is being perpetuated day in, day out. From the moment that our children go to school, when they are 4 years old, they are given a false hope and a false dream that they might be able to make it out of poverty. But the system is not set up to do that. It's not set up to help them. I was fortunate enough to get bursaries and the highest amount of SAS, but I still had to work crummy part-time jobs on the side of an already 35 to 40 hour university week. That is a full-time job. How can we expect students to do an extra job on top of that for minimum wage and then to be told they're not working hard enough? Our lecturers, our staff, the commercial staff that work in these charities, they are all underpaid. A charity is supposed to exist because a government is not filling a need. I see charities everywhere. Every single one of us here is a part of a charity. Why do we still need a charity to be providing the need of basic education for our people? Why do we need charities to be protesting, rallying outside Parliament for fair working conditions? A charity is supposed to be something that you put your soul into because there just doesn't happen to be enough government support. There isn't any government support. It needs to be more, it needs to be now. It's not a situation that's just going to magically disappear. It's a system that needs dismantled and rebuilt using fresh parts. I'm all for recycling, but this stuff cannot be reused.
That was a belter, the last line. Yeah, a belter, the last line from Allison. So thank you so much, Allison. Next up, I'd like to invite Emma Wallace from Fife College Student Association. Emma.
So I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So I'm going to tell a little story. So this student ended up homeless, being a single parent, having to rely on loans and credit cards to get by, just because there wasn't enough money support for the students. This was my story. So I've already been through the hardship, and now that I'm in such a student-facing role, I'm now seeing that daily. Students are coming forward saying that they can't afford to come to college. They can't even afford the bus to come to college or go home again. Why should we decide what we spend our money on, whether that is going to college or supply meals for our family or just get by every day? Students are facing so many hardships daily. We're seeing it all the time. So why are the Scottish Government turning their backs on students, especially college students, since we're coming from such a big walk of life? Why is the support not there anymore? It's been going on for years. I was a college student years ago as well, and it was still going on then. So why is it still happening nowadays? Thank you.
Okay, our final speaker for this rally is our fantastic UCU UK President, Vicky Blake.
Hello, Scotland. It is such a privilege and pleasure to be here with you today, and all of the fantastic speakers that have gone before me. Thank you so much for all of your words and all of your stories. Education is a public good. Education should be free. Education should be free and accessible to everyone at any stage of their life. That we hear from students still in 2022 who are homeless. That we hear still from students in 2022 who are juggling multiple jobs just to be able to eat and to try and put a roof over their heads and study for a better future is a disgrace. That in 2022 we have staff who are there in universities and colleges supporting students who are themselves juggling multiple jobs, struggling to put a roof over their head, struggling to feed themselves and their families is a disgrace. But what is not a disgrace is when I look out at all of you and I see all of us here together, students and staff alike, saying we are education, we are our universities, we are our colleges. We are powerful. We are powerful because we understand the transformative power that education can have. And we understand too the horrible, horrifying impact that barriers to education reinforce the awful, awful inequality that is riven throughout our society. The one that education purports to be there to change is the one that in many cases the barriers to education reinforce. And that is replicated at every level. It is replicated when students try to access their education, when they want to go to university. My job, I'm an academic related member of staff. I work in widening participation. I work with students who do not have the easiest route into education. And I work with their hopes and dreams. And I feel terrible that I know the hardships that are likely to lie ahead of them, even if they get into the university that they want to go to. I know that they are going to be in shocking levels of debt that cannot be justified on any argument. And those who gave us tuition fees and those who helped to raise them have failed us. Extremely proud that our union UCU represents over 130,000 education workers in the UK and that our policy says that education should be free. And I would like to reinforce that here with this message, that we are absolutely with our students, that fees are unfair, that debt is unconscionable when you are entering into your education and into your future. And we understand the pain that it causes because our members are also experiencing that pain because many of our members also carry that student debt. And many of our members are students who are working to teach the next generation of students coming through. A friend of mine and one of our members recently told her story to a national newspaper about living in a tent while teaching, while working on her PhD. And the worst thing about that story is that it isn't actually that surprising. There are many, many of us, students and staff alike, who are sofa surfing, who are homeless, who are struggling for food. And I really think we have to bring it back to those basic messages. This is about decency. This is about decency for staff in our current working conditions, where we have race pay gaps, disability pay gaps, gender pay gaps. That cannot be excused. There is no excuse. We have such high levels of precariousness in our education sector that we know that at least 100,000 of our members are on some form of insecure contract. We also know, and this is partly due to the extremely unsafe workloads that many staff are suffering with, that over half of our members are showing signs of probable depression. We know that many of our students are actually experiencing the same, and the resources are not there for our students. Where our institutions are focusing on big shiny buildings and big capital expenditure projects, many of you are struggling to access the counselling and support services that you need. And the workers that are providing those services are also struggling, and many of them are outsourced. Many of them are in insecure contracts themselves. I've spoken to counsellors who are on precarious contracts. If there is one thing that we know that we need, in an education institution. It is support for our students, and nobody on any kind of contract should be suffering that kind of precarity. So this is a fairly miserable picture. We are facing up to 35% on average cuts to our pensions in our future beyond the current misery. We are suffering from pay erosion that reflects the kind of pay erosion that students are also experiencing in their casualised jobs that they are working in to try and keep themselves afloat. We are all breaking because we are so exhausted. To go back to Lena's point from the beginning of this rally, we are exhausted. All of us, students and staff together, I would wager, are shattered. We have been taken for granted. We have been expected to keep smiling when more is thrown at us. And in the pandemic, in the height of it, in the lockdowns, we saw that. And we see it now when we're being let down at the ending of restrictions around the UK and the response in our institutions, laxity about the precautions that we're taking to keep us safe. So I'm going to end on a more positive note, because that is all really quite miserable. The thing is, there is failure endemic in this sector, but it is not our failure. We are strong, and I want you to look around you. Look at the people here. Look who you are beside. Look who you know, and look who you don't know yet. But understand that we are together, and we make a family. We are siblings in struggle. And we will win if we stay strong and we stay together and we keep fighting and we return time after time until we get what we need and what we deserve. And that is an end to poverty, an end to precarity, fair and equal pay, and access to the services that we need to keep us healthy and safe. So in struggle, solidarity, everyone.
So a massive thank you to all of our speakers today, and the biggest thank you. Thank you to the politicians who came out, the politicians who spoke, and the politicians who are standing at the side as well. And thank you to you for coming along for a big in-person rally. The biggest rally apparently outside the Scottish Parliament since the elections. Pretty impressive. What do you have to say, Lena?
I have to say, I want to echo what some people have said. We will win. We will end tuition fees. We will end student poverty. Hell, we will end poverty. We will win secure contracts, and we will win fair pay and fair pensions. So next week, I will see you on the picket lines, and when we have won, I will see you in the classrooms. Thank you. Safe getting home, everyone.
UCU Edinburgh folk, if you have placards, please bring them over here. UCU Edinburgh people, bring your placards over to the banner, which if you see me, I'm waving. And if you don't see me, ask somebody else.